Thank you, Sam. Yeah, my name's Daniel Pietersen, and as you can see there, we're going to be talking today about haunted houses in time. We've got that clock there going back and back and back, and we are going to go back through some various bits of temporal anomaly. But like we mentioned earlier on, this is part of a series of talks. This worked from an idea that I had a while back, actually, about looking at haunted houses in video games. That was the first one that I did. That was called Welcome to the Nightmare Rooms, which was a riff on Jet Set Willy, a very a topical modern game from about 40 years ago. Then we moved on to This Place is a Tomb, which is another one of my kind of obsessions, is probably a fair word, looking at horror in space and haunted houses in space. So we looked at things like Alien, Event Horizon, and the film Solaris, which is very much a haunted house in space. And then on to the most recent one, We're Not Supposed to Be Down Here, Haunted Houses at Sea. And that went down into the depths of the abyss, going through Jaws right on the surface, down to Underwater, which is a film I like a lot for its claustrophobic kind of alien in the sea vibe. So if you can, go back to the Romancing the Gothic YouTube. Those are freely available for you to review. There's a couple of warnings I'm going to put up, and these are very mild. I don't think there is too much in here that goes beyond the pale. The main one is that there are mild spoilers for a couple of films. We've got Back to the Future, a classic horror film, Triangle, and Coherence. The most recent of those, Coherence, is over 10 years old. So they aren't recent films. And the spoilers are kind of about what happens rather than how it happens. So I think the narrative still stands. They are still worth watching. There are, I think I said some, I think there is one image that is quite, at least the aftermath of violence. I'll try and remember to let people know when that's coming up. But obviously it is fictional violence. It is special effects. And there are some scenes of people in distress because these are largely horror films. So they will feature people in distress. Sam also said that this talk might be about 40 minutes. It's a talk about time, so time may go strange. I may run over that, largely because I haven't timed the talk yet. But the final warning about this is that this might all be nonsense. Because I'm talking about time and time is a very strange thing, this will be largely theoretical. By theoretical, I mean made up. A lot of these things are things I think about when I'm walking the dog, when I'm doing various tasks like that. So we'll see where we go. You will notice some recurring motifs for anyone who's seen my talks before. And talking of talks I've done before, some of you may have seen a slide very similar to this. There's a few definitions right at the start of the talk. What is a haunted house is the main question that we have to ask ourselves when we're talking about haunted houses. There are three definitions that I use that kind of blend together, and I keep reusing these just to keep it consistent. The first one is that it's a playground, hyphenated word, that exists within delineated boundaries. So it is a space that has edges. You move into it. Hopefully, as you'll see in that third point, you may move out of it. That space is filled with preternatural antagonistic entities and environments. So I've used those words quite specifically. Preternatural, so it's things that we don't necessarily understand. Doesn't mean that they're supernatural. It may be things that are just confusing beyond our understanding. And I've used entities and environments. So we have monsters and traps, largely, the classic haunted house problems. And then, like I said before, the end goal of a haunted house is to no longer be in the haunted house, to escape and or survive until you can escape. And a lot of that, those points, derives from this quote, which I've used in many of my talks from Johann Huizinga, from his book Homo Ludens, The Playing Man, playing person, should probably be the better translation. And he says that all play moves and has its being within a playground marked off beforehand, either materially or ideally, deliberately or as a matter of course. They are forbidden spots, isolated, hedged round, hallowed, within which special rules obtain. All are temporary worlds within the ordinary world, dedicated to the performance of an act, a part. And those points about them being playgrounds marked off, ritually forbidden, they're temporary worlds that can appear and collapse, and they have special rules which obtain within them. They apply as much to playing, to a game of football, to a game of cricket, as much as they do to haunted houses. I think that quote really fuels a lot of the stuff I talk about when I talk about haunted houses. That's the easy definition. And then we talk about what is time. Time is very strange. There are two types of time. There is clock time, and that's the seconds, the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, the years, the decades, and on and on and on, that we mark down religiously almost. The clock tells us the time, and we mark off days as they pass in our lives. Time always continues in a straight line. The arrow of time moves ever on. Cause always leads to effect, but it is an anthropocentric, human-centric kind of time. And it is relatively arbitrary. But, Pietersen, you buffoon, time isn't arbitrary. Time is based around things that we can observe, the Earth rotating around the sun, the change of the seasons, and of the position of where we are in space. Kind of, yes. We have two types of time, but we have multiple types of day. And if we're basing time on days, then we have to look at these to show how strange time can be when we start thinking about it. So we have a sidereal day. That is the measurement of the Earth completing a complete 360 rotation. So you spin round in space and you come to where you were before. And that takes 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 4.09 seconds. So that's not a day, because we all know a day is 24 hours. That is because when the Earth rotates 360 degrees, it is already itself rotating around the sun. So we have a more accurate version of what a day is. And that's when not only does the Earth rotate, but the sun moves back into the position it was before. That is slightly more than a 360-degree rotation, but it's a day. So when the sun returns to its original point in the sky, that takes 24.000006 hours. Not a day, because a day is 24 hours. So what do we call 24 hours? Well, the obvious answer is a day. But that's wrong, because 24 hours is a nycthemeron. Again, not a day, because it's obviously not a day, because it's a nycthemeron. So time is strange when we start to think about it. We think of things, we think of definitions, and like a lot of the ways that humans do things, we think of definitions as long as they're rough enough, but more than anything like that, as long as they comply with our prejudices. We think a day is 24 hours, but none of those definitions of a day is 24 hours, and the one that isn't a day. So we have the second kind of time. We have cosmic time, the time of the universe, of reality, and that is the measure of change, of how things change and if they change. If there is no change anywhere, time doesn't happen. Everything is static and never and eternal. Does that continue in a straight line? Does cause always precede effect? We wouldn't know. If cosmic time started going backwards, or effects started happening before their causes, we would be oblivious to it because we're within that kind of time. We would start going back. We would start jumping around all over the place. And that could be happening now. Because we experience time in a certain way doesn't mean that's what time actually is doing. There's time we experience, and then there's the time that we don't. Which is all well and good. But why talk about time at all? If time is just a thing that happens to us, which we happen to experience in certain ways, why bother about it? Why not just let it wash over us? Well, because we exist in time is exactly the reason we should be talking about it, and we do talk about it quite a lot. We exist within time, we are of time and in time, and it fascinates many artists. We've obviously got, the most immediate one is the time machine. H.G. Wells's tale from 1895. It's kind of credited, it's not the first time travel narrative by a long stretch, as we'll see, but it is credited with inventing at least the phrase the time machine. Time machines and timelines and time frames and all those kind of things, which are kind of almost not even sci-fi anymore. They are very, fairly commonplace ideas. And Wells' story is interesting for two different reasons. He has the time traveler, who he doesn't name, just calls him the time traveler, go far, far, far into the future. The main thrust of the narrative with the Eloi and the Morlocks is 800,000 years into the future. But he doesn't stop there. He carries on until the Earth is lingering under a dying red sun. And even further when the sun itself starts to sputter and go out, and he witnesses effectively the death of the solar system, if not of the universe itself. But the other interesting thing is that even though this is a time machine and he is a time traveler, the machine does not move. It moves through time, but it doesn't move through space. It has no wheels, it has no way of moving around, it simply travels through time. And we'll think about that difference between movement in space and movement in time a bit later on, how they're different and how they're similar. Earlier, we have A Christmas Carol, very rarely thought of as a science fiction novel, largely because it isn't, but it does have, if not time travel, then at least the use of time as a narrative device. Scrooge sees things that happened in the past, things that might happen in the future, and he has a chance to change those things. And again, that's interesting. He's witnessing things that might happen, and could be described as a vision. Is it actually a glimpse of the real future if he carries on that course? He obviously, he rethinks that, and things do change. But it is an interesting way of using time as a narrative device. Doctor Who, I won't, this is the only time, perhaps disappointing to some people, I will talk about Doctor Who, but we have to talk about Doctor Who, hugely sort of culturally important and popular series that's used time travel, sometimes simply as a setting device, sometimes as a more complicated plot point. Famously, when multiple doctors from multiple timelines meet, they understand and comprehend what's going on. How the Doctor experiences time is fundamentally different from how we do and how many of his companions do. That sets up kind of tensions, narrative plots and things like that. It is for something that is so popular, and mainstream TV really, it does delve into to some very strange elements of time itself. We have books like Redshift, Alan Garner's 1973 tale, which uses 3 different timelines that link in and becomes very strange and kind of quite cold and disturbing at some points. The phrase that apparently fueled his writing of the book, "Not really now, not anymore." There's something very strange about that sort of creation of words and what they mean and what different things that they can mean. A good book to look at when we're talking about time. And then we have going back, and I said that the Time Machine was very much not the first use of time as a narrative device. We have the Urashimako, which is a story that's been used many different times, but largely it is that kind of abduction or at least time loss narrative. We see that in a lot of Western fairy tales, but this Japanese story talks about a fisherman who travels off to an oceanic civilization, lingers there for a handful of days, sometimes not even that, depending on how it's told, and then returns to find that everyone he knows is long dead. Time has moved on in a different manner. He himself is still a young man, but he has lost time. So time, this some kind of obsession, concern, thoughtfulness about what time is and how we experience it has gone through large parts of human history, and will still do it as long as we exist within time and don't understand it, which is something that will come out quite a lot. So we get now to the meat of the talk. We will have 3 different kind of case studies using different films. And the first one is perhaps the most simple, the concept of divergence, of time splitting, becoming different. And for that, I'm going to use Back to the Future. Haunted houses. Yes, there is a haunted house in Back to the Future, or at least I think there is a haunted house. If you haven't seen Back to the Future, and God help you if you haven't, The gist of the story is that Marty McFly, played by Michael J. Fox, who you can see on the poster there, accidentally travels back to 1955. That's 30 years before the time that this film is set. As he does so, he interrupts his parents' first meeting. They normally accidentally meet when his father falls off his bike and his mother takes care of him. He interrupts that meeting, and he then subsequently, a large part of the film is him rectifying that, getting them together and getting home before, again, a nice narrative device, this gives some urgency to it, before he disappears from reality altogether. But it's not quite that simple. When Marty arrives, as I said, in 1955, 30 years in the past for him, so prior to his own birth, he disrupts his parents' first meeting. That means they don't get married and they don't have children. And it's children plural because Marty has a brother and a sister. That has disastrous consequences for Marty and his siblings. He has a photo of them in his pocket and he sees slowly they are erased from that photograph. They are erased from reality, because he has interrupted the cause and the effect of his parents meeting and having children. But Marty remembers these things happening, even though he has the photograph, which is slowly erasing, which is giving this rise to something being either damaged or rectified. How can events that have happened now no longer have happened? How can they have no longer have had happened, we could say? Time makes us talk in very strange ways. And I think that's because Marty doesn't actually travel to the past. He doesn't specifically travel to his past. The film wants us to think, and I think the film actually thinks, that when Marty completes his quest, his parents get back together, he reactivates the DeLorean time machine, and he goes back to his own timeline. Everything is back as it should be. But we know the film tells us this can't be true. When he first goes to meet Doc Brown to have a demonstration of the time machine, they do so at the parking lot of Twin Pines Mall. The film very clearly shows us this picture of the sign. When Marty comes back, he goes to try and interrupt this demonstration, which is taking place at Lone Pine Mall. As part of the film, and it's a very small glimpse of it, but I think one that's has large consequences. When Marty's driving the DeLorean time machine in 1955, he runs over a tree, and that is the tree that would have been the Twin Pines. He leaves single, lone pine. So this is a new timeline, a new dimension, we could say. He travels to this new divergent timeline, which has been created directly by his actions. Maybe it existed before and he's jumped across. We don't know. I won't delve too much into that. So we have a 1985.1. Marty travels through the 1955 period and re-emerges in 1985.2. We have the Twin Pines reality and the Lone Pine reality. But when he goes back to this Lone Pine reality, 1985.2, he sees himself. 1985.2 has its own Marty, who then travels back into the past. But it's not. It's another divergent timeline that Marty, 1985.2 Marty, hops into. So where does that leave the original 1985.1? Do Marty's parents just sit there waiting for him to come back, which he never does because he's in the actual present of his own that he's created? That's quite dark. Their son has just disappeared, never to be seen again. They know that there's been a murder, some kind of strange accident, that kind of thing. Are they left alone without their son? Well, no, because that would give some primacy to that 1985.1 Marty. There must be, or there probably is, a timeline below that, to use a spatial term, where another Marty pops in, just as they've gone up, and that goes up and down infinitely. All of these Martys are jumping up one dimensional level and becoming ghosts in their own haunted house of their present. They shouldn't be there. They don't understand what's happening. The people that they meet are completely different and changed from how they should have been. Which I find, when you think about that, and whether you should think about that is a different matter, makes Back to the Future quite a creepy film. There is a lot of things going on in there. And again, as I said at the start, maybe things I've applied over the intention of the film. But it gives some philosophical implications for us. It means that choice has meaning and consequences, not necessarily meanings and consequences that we intend. Marty wanted to basically save himself, get his parents back together so that he and his siblings wouldn't disappear from reality. And because of that, he made choices. He may not have actively, consciously thought about a lot of them. He does have some urgency and it's quite a rapid film, but choice has meaning and consequences, which means we have this idea of free will. Different causes create different effects. If Marty had chosen not to trigger the time machine, which I think he does largely accidentally, but he could have done something slightly different, that would have had different effects. Those different effects would have rippled through all of these different layers, these many worlds of time and their dimensions. And fundamentally, actions can never be fully undone. Marty rectifies the situation. He gets his parents back. His siblings and himself don't disappear from reality, but it's not completely undone. He hasn't rewound the clock. He's rectified things. This cuts to the heart, effectively, of thermodynamics, which I don't think anybody has ever really suspected, maybe talks about in relation to Back to the Future. But there is a theory in a sort of demonstration in thermodynamics that if you break, say, a teacup that falls off the table onto the floor and it shatters, you can put that back, you can glue that back together, but it will always be broken. It will always have had been broken. You can't repair it so that that thing will never have happened. And that, again, I think goes to these ideas of choice. We always have to consider what it is that we're doing. And doing is a funny word. Or at least we hope these things can never be fully undone. You see there a picture of Michel Foucault. Yeah, he has his problems, but I always enjoy his writing. I don't know whether it's some of the drives a lot of my thought, but I do enjoy his writing a lot. I find it makes me think about a lot of things. And he has a quote. It's a famous quote, and it's often a quote that's brought up when people talk about the gibberish of philosophy. Foucault says that people know what they do. Frequently, they know why they do what they do, but what they don't know is what they're doing does. And this is translated from French, but it's equally convoluted in French, and I think Foucault does that intentionally a lot of the times. But it's, when you break it down, it is quite clear. People know what they do. I know what I'm doing. Some people may disagree, but I'm talking to you. I'm giving a talk. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it too. But what I do not know is what doing that does. I have no idea, and probably will never have an idea of the effect it has on you, might have on you, what it will lead you to do in the future or to think, whether it does lead you to do anything. And that, I think, this idea in Back to the Future, Marty knows what he's doing, and he knows why he's doing it, but he doesn't know the consequences of what that doing will have. He doesn't know what will happen on. And as Foucault shows there, that might leave us with our heads in our hands. So I'm going to move on to the next, time trouble. Obviously, if things can diverge, then they can loop back. And the time loop, I think, is possibly one of the key narrative devices of time travel. These ideas of loops and reoccurrences does come up quite a lot. So I'm going to use for this the film Triangle, which I had only seen recently. A friend of mine recommended it, and it is good. There's a lot. The acting could, something could be said about the acting, but the idea, I think, it does keep you on your toes. You can probably work out what's going to happen, but the way it happens is very good. A group of friends head off into the blue sky and blue sea in their yacht for, I think it's like a birthday or something like that, just to travel around. But a storm comes over, largely kind of, again, a preternatural storm that doesn't seem quite right. And their yacht capsizes. But they find refuge on an abandoned ocean liner. Personally, I would have stayed on the yacht. Abandoned ocean liner does not seem to me to be a safe space, but I've read a lot of horror stories. But even this narrative It's not that simple. We have to give a bit of grounding for this and talk about the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was a Greek and he was the son of King Aeolus. And as you can see there, foreshadowing, um, Sisyphus defied the gods and he was condemned to push a boulder uphill for all eternity, specifically condemned to do this by Zeus. And we have there my favorite depiction of Sisyphus from Ulysses 31, the I think it's Japanese-French anime, which goes through Greek myths, I think, really well. But the Sisyphus episode is specifically very good, very chilling depiction of Sisyphus, especially for what is largely a kid's cartoon. He did this because he was an inveterate criminal, at least in the eyes of the gods. He was a show-off, he was arrogant, he denied their primacy, and he did many things which caused them to effectively hate Sisyphus. But his worst crime, which is a crime he was committed while he was being punished for another crime, is that he imprisoned Thanatos, the god of death. And that meant that no mortal could die. That angered the gods even more. A, it's wrong, and B, Ares couldn't have any fun. It's no fun fighting if people don't die. It's certainly no fun if people get injured mortally but don't die. And then they're whining and misery. It's not much fun at all. And you can see Thanatos in that vase there with his brother Hypnos, the god of sleep, carrying away a dead body down into the realms of the dead. And Thanatos is the god of dying. Hades is the god of the dead. There's a slight difference between the two. Thanatos is the process of dying. But very crucially for Sisyphus, the task repeats, the task loops, but it's a punishment. So Sisyphus must remember that it repeats. He must know the futility. And to go back to another piece of philosophy, we must imagine that Sisyphus is content with that Sisyphus is happy. He becomes the task. He becomes the doing of the task, becomes his entire being. Is that a dark reading of sort of perpetual torment, or is it a dark idea of coming to terms with the things that are happening to you? That's, I think, one for personal judgment. So in Triangle, it uses very much this idea of haunting as an unfinished business. It could be a punishment, or it could simply be the fact that you can't let go. And we see that in hauntings. The ghost lingers because there's something that they still have to do, something that they can't let go, some crime that they've committed or has been committed against them. And right at the start of the film, the main character, Jess, who's played by Melissa George, she approaches this boat on the jetty, and the boat owner, Greg, asks Victor, who is his kind of assistant, he asks Jess if she's okay, and Victor replies, "I don't think so," talking for her because she is visibly distressed. She can't remember where she's been. Her responses are slightly hazy, and her eyes are sort of darting around as if she can't work out where she is. And that might remind some people of another Greek idea, the idea that the dead, as they move into the underworld, forget what's happened to them. They forget all their worldly cares. So they can either enjoy the good underworld that they go to, or they can just dwindle and linger in the rather indifferent underworld that they might be sent to. That's a key point of the film, this idea of the dead forgetting and the living sometimes not quite remembering. But she does remember the life with her son. She says that he has autism. He says that he likes repetition and he likes the routine, and that every day is the same, which is another piece of foreshadowing. As they head out and they see this storm on the horizon, it's not quite got to them yet. The Ox radio picks up this garbled distress signal, and things start to go wrong from this moment on. They hear a voice saying, "Help me, please help me." And she continues to say, "They're killing us. They're killing everyone." Again, whether I would have got on that ocean liner is in debate. The storm capsizes their yacht. There's a kind of scene of the mast breaking, so they are kind of abandoned and floating on the ocean, which is now seems quite serene. The storm has passed over, and the group boards the apparently abandoned cruise liner Aeolus. And it's an old kind of 1920s one. Looks quite a cool ship, really. But it has these long corridors lit by quite dim lighting. It is very haunted house. It's very haunted house in space in some ways. These ideas of these sort of engineered corridors going off to bulkheads with the engine throbbing in the background. The other characters are trying to explore, trying to find the crew, trying to find dry clothes and things like that. But Jess has this feeling of deja vu. I feel like I know this place, she says. But she even finds the kind of denies the feeling of deja vu to an actual having seen some of her belongings. She finds her keys on a key fob that has a picture of her son. They're undeniably hers. She sees that time starts to break down. She looks at her wristwatch, and it's not the time that the other characters say that it is. It's the time that the clock on the wall of the ship says that it is. Who is right? Is anybody right? Then we have timelines starting to intersect. Jess is held up at shotgun by a gunman who turns out to be a gun woman. It is her meeting herself. She becomes increasingly disorientated and distressed, and various terrible things start to happen. Because it's the time loop of Triangle is a loop, but it's a loop within a loop. And these loops start to break in slightly out of syncopation, and characters can witness things happening to themselves in other versions of their own time. It becomes quite confusing, but I think for a time travel film, it's fairly consistent. There are a couple of things that you could maybe pick up on, but you could get rid of those by saying something happened off screen. It is the peril of a time loop film is that sometimes things mess up. And I think that Triangle, for all its faults, does do a good job of it. But it's not that simple. This is, I should have warned before, sorry, this is the kind of gory image. This character, Sally, flees after being injured, apparently accidentally by Jess, and flees onto this upper deck where she finds that this has happened again and again and again. A huge mound of Sally corpses. And I think when I saw this first in this film, this actually kind of took my breath away a bit. I've watched a lot of horror films, and I do worry that I get kind of inured to them. But this scene and the implications of this scene, that this has been happening again and again and again, really kind of struck me. And it's for Jess to understand that this has happened again and again and again. Like Sisyphus, Jess has to know that she is being punished for something that I won't reveal because that is the big part of the film. But she has to know that the things that she has done will have these effects. They have had them before, they will have them again. And because she is being punished, but she's being punished by herself, not by the gods, not by some cosmic entity or something like that. She is punishing herself for something that she has done, or she believes that she has done. But because she's punishing herself, no higher authority is enforcing that, she has a chance to let go. But sadly, it's a chance that she doesn't take. The end of the film, very similar to the start of the film. And in fact, it's so similar that the only thing that changes the end of the film to the start of the film is the fact that we know what has happened in the film. And I find this is a nice little film. And I'm kind of sad that I missed it, but only watched it quite recently, because the ideas that are in this film of these things of we punish ourselves, we choose not to make choices that could help us, and we loop round and we dwell on things. This process of dwelling and kind of languoring in our own unfinished business is very strong in this film. I think well done. I think well done for what is obviously a fairly low budget horror film. And the narrative of Triangle is a loop within a loop, but it's a loop within a loop within a loop, and it goes round and round and round. And we have, if that's the case, we have no way of knowing if that triple loop is itself within another loop. We have planets orbiting around a sun, which orbits around the galaxy, and we go out into these different walls of time and what they are doing. There is famously in Triangle, and this, if you look at upon Reddit, this is a question that's asked a lot of. There's a character who just suddenly disappears. It could be explained that she disappears when the yacht capsizes, but she's never mentioned before. Is she part of another different, wider loop? Or is she just a character who disappears? It's hard to say. But what we do know is that Jess's actions within these loops are predetermined. She thinks she's making choices, but all she's doing is going down these different kind of nested loops. Choice has no meaning because there is no choice. She has to do the things that she does so that they will happen again in the future. Unlike Back to the Future, where choice creates different possibilities of choice, there is no possibility of choice for Jess, apart from that one time where she can turn away and walk back along the jetty. But again, maybe that's part of a wider loop. You have no idea. And that brings me back to a larger quote. Again, another problematic philosopher, aren't they all? Nietzsche's quote from The Gay Science. And he says this, there's something about this that I really enjoy is strong, but the idea of it, just to sit in your room and think of this, gives you some insight into Nietzsche's mind. What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, this life, as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more. And there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? So Nietzsche's saying, if you were condemned to live your life again and again and again, would that be some kind of hellish torment? He does say in the next line, but would it be an angel who came to you? And you would say, these joys I can experience again for the first time, how wonderful that would be. What Nietzsche's saying, not that you're condemned to repeat the things, but you are condemned to experience the consequences of your own actions. If you look back along your own life, what would you want to happen again? What would you never want to happen again? And it makes us think, the things that we've done in our lives, if we did have to go back and experience them again, knowing the inevitability of what will unfold, would we be grateful for that or would we regret it? That's individual for every person. It's certainly individual for Jess, and she continues to curse the demon who does this. But sadly, the demon is her. And we move on to the last of the three time troubles, the idea of convergence. This is a quicker one, so hopefully we will beat time. And I'm going to talk about a film called Coherence. Again, a film that has its issues. It's very low budget. It was largely ad-libbed, you can kind of tell, but it has some really good ideas for what is obviously a very small location, very small cast, sort of indie sci-fi horror film. And in Coherence, a group of friends gather for a dinner party to celebrate the passing of a comet exceptionally close to the Earth. This is a comet that's come by a number of times, like Halley's Comet, but for copyright reasons, they don't call it Halley's Comet. And it's passing closer than it ever has before, and it's clearly visible in the night sky. But, as you may have guessed, it's not that simple. In the middle of the dinner party, with the comet full in the sky above them, there is a power failure. All the lights go out and the internet dies, all these different kinds of things. Could potentially be caused by the comet, we don't know. It's never really answered, but it's implied heavily. All of the houses around are also without power, and the group look out into blackness. Apart, they notice, from one other house, nearby, short walk, but they decide to head across to try and find if there's anybody else there, if they have a phone signal so they can contact them, or if they have any other source of power. And as they do head out, carrying these blue glow sticks, which are their only source of light, because we all have glow sticks in the house, they meet themselves coming the other way, but holding red glow sticks. Keep that in your mind. It's a very obvious piece of filmmaking that you have to hold these glow sticks, but it works, and it becomes quite frightening at points. As you can see, they're staring in horror at this group that they can see are probably themselves, and then they both run away. They both flee from each other. So even though it's themselves, they are immediately frightened by themselves. And what we learn is that the gravitational effect of this comet has allowed separate timelines, which are normally decohered, to cohere. They grind together and they start to exist simultaneously. Something about gravity, which affects space, has also affected time. And those timelines start to mingle together. We can see here two characters which are part of the original dinner party, but they both have red glow sticks. So in that confusion of meeting each other, the two parties have also blended together. They are not the people who they are expected to be, although in many ways they are. And we have multiple separate timelines. This character here, Mike, who's a recovering alcoholic, he says, we always think that we might come and meet our dark version of ourselves. But what if we're the dark version? And as he says that, kind of denying, ironically denying the things that he said, a green glow stick carrying Mike comes in and beats him savagely. He himself has said he might do this, preemptively attack someone who thinks he's probably still an alcoholic, but that happens to him. And it's a quick, barely few seconds scene. The guy rushes in and then rushes back out again. Mayhem inevitably ensues. And I say multiple timelines, I mean multiple timelines. There is a scene near the end when the main character walks around through darkness, meeting other houses, and there are glow stick colours and glow stick colours. And there's nothing to say that just because one character is holding a blue glow stick, they're from the same timeline as another character holding a blue glow stick. There are only so many colours of glow sticks, I imagine. So we have all these timelines that are sort of coursing in different ways. And we see some where everybody's happy. They have decided to stay put, wait it out, and they seem to be having a fairly good time. We see a house where half of the occupants are tied to chairs with masking tape over their mouths. And that idea of what will happen when the comet leaves, will those timelines drift apart? I was going to say that's left ambiguous at the end. It isn't really. Those timelines have been stuck together in some way. Things will never, ever be the same again. And that asks, I think, how different would someone that you know have to be for you to even notice that they're different? There's a part where the main character meets her boyfriend and they're talking and they're saying, do you remember this? Do you remember this? And he says something that makes her realize that he is not her boyfriend. But it takes a few moments. It takes a few moments for her to realize that, and it's just one small thing that she could arguably have missed. And how different would they have to be for it to matter? What is it that would stick for you? If you met a friend and they was slightly off, would it just be that? Or would it have to be direct actions that they took that were different? Because people do act differently around different people. We have different faces, we have different personas that we use in certain times. And we do get very upset when people don't act in the way that we think they should. We become quite possessive in many ways, and it does upset us. Crucially, how different would you have to be? Would you know if you woke up and your personality had changed slightly? Would you know that it had? You probably wouldn't, because it does. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago. I'm not, certainly 20 years ago. And what person will you be 10, 20 years in the future, if you are indeed still a person at that time? Would you know? Would you think about it? Would you go, oh, I was a different person back then? I can't be blamed for things that I've done because I was a different person back then, and I can't be blamed for things that I might do. I've not done them. I would be a different person to have to do that. And yet we do become different over time. And that's because time doesn't exist. Time is strange, as I said at the start, but time also, is it really a thing? The only time that we know of is now, but now it's gone, now it's in the past. And then there's now, and then there's now. And these are all different slices of a strange kind of flow of things. And that time is a tiny candle, the time that we experience, especially when it's compared to the amount of time there was and there will be. The time traveler travels 800,000 years into the future, which is a tiny percentage of all time that has ever been. But think about how long that actually is. And that time is filled with ghosts, haunted by untold ghosts of things that happened but no longer are, and things which might happen but aren't yet. And we can think of them as memories and hopes, perhaps. But there's another darker timeline to this idea. There are things that never did happen and never ever will, but they still impinge upon our life. If you think about the things that you didn't do but wish you'd had, that doesn't exist. It never existed, but it still has an impact on you. It might inform the ideas that the actions that you do in the future as much as the memories of the things that did happen. And we can maybe think of those as regrets and loss. I'm sure there's a more cheerful way of putting them. And this, people might be thinking in their minds, this is hauntology, and it is the idea that you have an ontology, the study of the things that are, and then Derrida's hauntology, the study of the things that aren't. But things that aren't leave gaps and they leave spaces, and those spaces inform reality. And this is my final philosophical quote, not a philosopher, but a playwright. But I'm sure as a French playwright, he would think of himself as a philosopher. Jean-Baptiste Poquelin, known as Molière, who wrote many famous plays like Hypochondriac, which is a very good one. But he had a quote, famous quote, and he said, "We die only once, but for such a long time." And that can be taken as quite a negative thing. You know, we have one life and then nothing. But I don't think it is. I think it's a kind of call out to say, we don't have a lot of time out of all the time there is. We don't have much of it. So we should make the best use of what we have. Thank you very much. And that is the end of my time.